It's a busy Tuesday here on NFL Live. Here's our timeline. Former Jags running back Chris Ivory signing with the Buffalo Bills. The team made it official, announcing he signed a 2-year deal. The Jags also say they will not franchise or transition tag on wide receiver Allen Robinson. The team has exclusive negotiation rights with Robinson until March 12th at 4 o'clock, at which point he'll become a free agent. And at 12:24 here on the East Coast, the NFL says longtime referee Ed Hockley is retiring. What's interesting, his son Sean is being promoted to a referee. And it's also official here. Rams have placed a non-exclusive franchise tag on LaMarcus Joyner. That will mean that wide receiver Sammy Watkins now is a true free agent. Third straight year the Rams have used the franchise tag. The countdown is on. 2 hours, 28 minutes and change now until the official deadline for the franchise tag, 4 o'clock Eastern. Here's what we know so far. Tag, Jarvis Landry, Ezekiel Ansah, Cowboys defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence, and then just minutes ago, LaMarcus Joyner. We will continue to watch Le'Veon Bell and Graham Gano. Wow, that's a mouthful. It is franchise tag deadline day. 4 o'clock Eastern, the official deadline. We will stay with you up until close to that time. And anyway, Wendi Nix, Field Yates, and with us today, Redskins safety. I can still say that.
Yes,
Redskins safety DeAngelo Hall making his, I think, NFL Live debut. No?
Yeah, I might have been on a time or two.
A time or two?
But it's been a while. So
okay, all right. So it's still new.
Yes, reintroduction.
That works.
That works, yeah. All things new. Well, you picked a good day. There's plenty to talk about, and we'll start here. The Steelers say they've informed Le'Veon Bell they will apply the franchise tag to Bell for the second consecutive year, given a deal is now highly unlikely by today's 4 o'clock deadline. Bell insists he will not play for less than $14.5 million a year, so some distance still remains between these two sides. Jeremy Fowler joins us now, and Jeremy, you spoke with Le'Veon Bell, who we know now, or we expect to be tagged. How does he expect the next 5 or so months to go as the two sides continue to talk?
Wendy, great to be with you. And basically, Le'Veon Bell is just going to chill out, and he's going to wait for the Steelers to try to come closer to him. Steelers have offered a few different contracts dating back to last year. They were a little over $13 million a year ago. Now they've gotten even higher, Bell told me, but they're not in that sweet spot. Bell won't tell me exactly what his magic number is, but of course it is above that $14.5 million tag. And so Bell says he's willing to wait. You know, he wants the long-term deal. He wants to retire a Steeler. Both sides want that. But Bell said, you know, he's comfortable holding true to where he's at. He said he's betting on himself. And really, he wants to be a standard bearer for running backs, and that's really not going to change. So this will probably drag out. He's expecting things to get tense closer to that mid-July deadline if things play out that way.
So, Jeremy, having said that, then I assume he also knows that if no deal is reached, he'll have to make some sort of decision if the Steelers do ask him to play under the tag. What's he say about that?
Well, Bell laid out all his options when I spoke with him, and that includes possibly retiring.
Well, if there is one stat that shows his versatility, it might be he's averaged 129 scrimmage yards per game in his career. It's the most in NFL history among players who played at least 50 games. You know, we call that Le'Veon Bell is good. You know, that's
the short version.
Le'Veon, to summarize. So having said all of that, though, the Steelers have decisions. I mean, no-brainer, they want him back. But let's talk about the salary cap implications.
Yeah, because we got official word yesterday, Wendy, that the NFL has set the salary cap for $177.2 million for the 2018 league year. On the one hand, you hear someone say, that's $10 million more than it was this past season. On the other hand, you look at it closely and you say that represents the smallest percentage increase from one year to the next over the past 5 years. This 177.2 figure is a little bit lower than teams were expecting or hoping for based off of projections that were taken both in December and more recently than that. At the end of the day, I get it. $177.2 million is plenty of money to facilitate your top players. But as we know, some teams push it right to the limit of the salary cap. This is perhaps a bit lower, and the Steelers and every team probably would have loved to see that number at 178.5 or $179 million.
Well, DeAngelo, you heard Jeremy, and Le'Veon Bell understands his options. Certainly he's being well counseled. At the end of the day, he'll have to make a business decision. You know, if you're Le'Veon Bell, do you hold out if you're asked to play under the franchise tag again?
Yeah, absolutely. He has to. I mean, he is too dynamic of a football player to that team to not be locked up long term. You know, I understand doing that franchise tag if, you know, we just seem to not be able to get anywhere near, you know, the number you want. But they seem to be pretty close. And if they're that close, they have to somehow find a way to get the deal done. Because if I'm him, you're not going to see me until week 10.
Wow. And, you know, both sides say they are making progress, so nobody's disputing that. It's clear that gap is narrowing. They just haven't gotten where they need to be. How about grab that button? Right over there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's give that to Tedy. Because
what did my soup
No,
pop out or something?
you're good. Because it's Tuesday, and so, you know, you've been here. You've seen this. We have panic or patience on Le'Veon Bell holding out, Tedy. Oh.
I just push it right down.
I
don't even have to finish the question in terms of panicking if you're a Steeler fan or a member of that Steeler locker room, because you saw what happened last year. He held out. He didn't come in that training camp, started the year slow, and then really got going post-Thanksgiving. You want Le'Veon Bell there. Arguably the best running back, one of the best offensive weapons in the National Football League. You want him there. You want him happy. You don't want this affecting your locker room. And I understand these are serious words Jeremy Fowler's talking about to be the standard bearer of running backs. I mean, so he's thinking about other people. He's thinking about David Johnson. He's thinking about Zeke Elliott. All of these other running backs are going to be coming up that can say, whoa, Lev got this. And that's the market. So that's the type of difference he wants to make. He's thinking about the entire running back profession. He should, too, because he's that good.
How much of that plays into a decision as a player, DeAngelo? I mean, you know, clearly, first and foremost, he wants to take care of himself and his family, and that's understandable. But when you are talking about representing a bigger group, how much of that is a consideration?
I mean, it plays a big part. And for Le'Veon Bell to even consider that, it just shows you that he's serious. He's for real. For him to consider, hey, it's not just about me. I want the guys behind me to benefit from this as well, because we undervalue the running back position. But that dude is a player. And there's a couple other guys who are very similar to him, like you said, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott when he gets around that time, you know. They should be paid. I don't know when we went to the age of not paying running backs. I know they get beat up, but when they're going, they can help your team a lot.
I almost equate it to the quarterback position. It seems like no matter where you are in terms of the best quarterback, the next quarterback gets the highest paid deal. All right, if it's Stafford, if it's going to be Cousins, it's going to be the next guy after that. It's almost like those quarterbacks talk. All right, it's almost like they talk. You imagine that? Those quarterbacks talk.
I'm sure the agents talk.
Those quarterback agents talk. You know, you got to get this much more than this. Pretty soon, these running backs are going to talk also. See, I'm this good, Lev got this, and then now it's my turn to get above that.
So we've established, Field, how important he is to this team, what he can bring. You also got a quarterback who's getting older. You don't know how long that window is going to last because this is a prolific offense. So, I mean, there's always a reason it might not get done, but can you see a way it doesn't get done?
Sure, I can see a way it doesn't get done.
That's what's fascinating, really.
There's a chasm right now, and I think the Steelers are comfortable making Le'Veon Bell not just the highest paid running back in football, but the highest paid running back in football by a wide margin. Because right now the market is depressed. To DeAngelo's point, we're talking about LaShawn McCoy or Devontae Freeman at $8.5 million. If Le'Veon Bell is not playing for anything less than $14.5 million per season, $6 million difference. That's a massive difference on an annual basis. And so there is certainly a scenario where the team say, listen, we can extend, but we can't extend that much. That would compromise us from keeping other players. And the Steelers are a good team. The reality, when you're a good team, you have good players, and good players cost a lot of money. So they don't have a bunch of guys that you can just say, all right, well, we're keeping Le'Veon Bell, but we're going to cut these three other guys who aren't important to us. They've got blue-chip players all over their roster.
They sure
do. This will not be easy.
Well, again, this is something we'll continue to watch. We'll talk more about it as the show goes on. 4 o'clock Eastern, technically, the deadline for teams to apply the franchise tag. The Dolphins have already done that when it comes to Jarvis Landry. In fact, they did it quite early. But the team has also granted Landry permission to seek a trade. In fact, the team met with Landry's agents at the Combine last week and discussed his ability to look elsewhere for 2018, which begs the question, Field, on potential landing spots for Jarvis Landry.
So there are obvious suitors that Jeremy Fowler, actually was on the show earlier, reported earlier on during the Combine, include the Baltimore Ravens, also the Chicago Bears, which you can expect them to be attached to basically any wide receiver that could be available this offseason. The trick in acquiring Jarvis Landry is that it's in essence a double dip. You're not just signing him to a lucrative deal because you know he's not going to say, yeah, I'll take $5 million a year. If he's going to get tagged for $16 million per season, he probably wants $14, $15 million per year in a multi-year deal. So you're paying him that money. Plus, you're trading for him, which could cost you a second-round pick or perhaps multiple picks. So you have to decide, is this the player that is worth, again, as I say, the double dip of investments to make your roster better?
Oh, DeAngelo, you were at the Combine, and you know what teams are talking about. You heard the scuttle, if you will. Give us some context. How good is Jarvis Landry?
He's very good. Very, very good. I mean, he not only can impact the game catching the ball, but he can impact the game when he gets his hands on the ball, not just running routes, I meant to say. His run out the catch ability is phenomenal. It's elite. I compared him to Anquan Bolden. Watching him in college, I thought he was a good player, but having been on the field and playing against him, he is one of the toughest runners with the ball in his hands. It's what makes him a great punt returner. It's why guys don't want to tackle him. You know, we always say in this league, hey, this guy's a good corner. This guy's a good safety or receiver. He's a good football player, and a good football player you want to get because you know at some point they'll affect the game.
How often do wide receivers set the tone for your team? Very, very, very rarely. I mean, Anquan Bolden was one of those guys like DeAngelo's talking about, but I watch the Miami Dolphins and I see the toughness coming from number 14, Jarvis Landry. He's setting the tone. I mean, a few years ago, I think when Philbin was there, when that team had basically quit in that London game, there was one guy playing hard, and I'll never forget this. It was Jarvis Landry fighting for extra yards, making the catches. To me, that said so much about him. He didn't care about the situation. He doesn't care what the record is. He just wants to play hard. That's what I see from him. And it's those stats in terms of yards after catch, one of the best in the league, like DeAngelo's talking about. This kid here to set your tone. The Edelmans, the Boldens, the Landrys.
That's good company.
Those are tough guys that really set the tone for your team.
Well, the Rams now, for the third straight year, have used the franchise tag. This time around, they've used the non-exclusive franchise tag on safety LaMarcus Joyner. Now, we had reported that they would likely choose between Joyner and Sammy Watkins. Perhaps that's the case. Either way, Sammy Watkins is now a true free agent. Both Sammy Watkins and LaMarcus Joyner helped lead the Rams to the playoffs last season. Watkins led the team with 8 receiving touchdowns, while Joyner's 3 picks were tied with Mark Barron for most on the Rams. So, Field, we know LaMarcus Joyner staying put for right now. What about Watkins?
Sammy Watkins, if he chooses, can be a free agent in 8 days and about 2 hours from right this moment. And this is a player that, of course, entered the league 4th overall pick in the draft. He has not tasted free agency yet. Many of us assumed last year when the Rams had a 2nd-round pick plus E.J. Gaines to acquire Sammy Watkins in a 6th-round pick that the idea was, let's trade for him now and then make him perhaps one of, if not the highest-paid wide receivers in football at some point in time. If Sammy Watkins wants to be patient and test the market, he can do so. Would it be prudent to do so? It absolutely would. There are teams that have more money to spend at that wide receiver spot than the Rams might. And if Sammy Watkins wants to become a $15 million per year wide receiver, I would not be surprised if there are multiple teams willing to make him that next Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Well, look, let's assume for the sake of argument that this was a choice between Joyner and Watkins. Let's just say that. So having said that, are the Rams making the right choice in your opinion?
Oh, they absolutely are making the right choice. I mean, it's a no-brainer. For as dynamic of a player as Sammy Watkins is, I can find a receiver. He's fast. He's fast. He's big, great hands. But I can't find a guy like LaMarcus Joyner. They don't grow on trees. I talked about with Jarvis Landry being a football player. LaMarcus Joyner is cut from the same cloth. He's a football player. He's a guy who was a nickel corner, slot guy inside. They moved him to safety, trying to figure out if he can do it. And that kid is phenomenal. He only had 3 interceptions, but he impacted the game in so many ways. 185 pounds. You see him right there blowing up receivers. I mean, this dude plays like he's 6'2", 215 pounds.
You keep the defensive player. I mean, receivers,
says Tedy Bruschi.
To pay that much for a receiver, I mean, you got to make the choice here. I mean, Wade Phillips is going to love having him. They just got another corner in a trade, if I believe
Marcus
so.
Peters.
That defense in that defensive backfield, it's shaping up now to get that defense going. You got the reigning defensive player of the year there. To have a defensive back that can cover is so valuable in this league. So I think they made the right choice.
Just by the way, a footnote here. This is not a foregone conclusion that Sammy Watkins will not be back next year. It's simply that if he wants to test the free agent market, the ball is in his court. And we know how the league works. You get competition amongst suitors. The next thing you know, the price tag goes way up. So the Rams, who eventually are going to have to pay Aaron Donald, eventually going to have to pay Todd Gurley, in 2 years going to have to pay Marcus Peters, and Jared Goff eventually is going to be eligible for a deal. I'm just saying. I know that's
a good problem to have.
Yeah,
a lot of young talent.
Really is.
But you know, salary cap managers and team presidents are always being mindful of right now, plus down the line, that Sammy Watkins, if he so chooses, will have plenty of suitors. But maybe he returns to L.A. because they feel as though he's a centerpiece of that offense.
Well, you never know. And to your point, Les Snead will take this negotiation all day, every day. We continue to make our way through this list as we work toward the 4 o'clock deadline for the franchise tag. The Jags have told receiver Allen Robinson that they will not use the franchise or the transition tag on him. It is still possible that the two sides can come to an agreement on a long-term deal, but Robinson would become an unrestricted free agent if that is not the case by 4 o'clock Eastern on March 15th. So, again, like we have with all of these players, Field, I'll start with you on potential options for Robinson.
Can we go back to the same teams we were just talking about for Jarvis Landry? Baltimore Ravens make some sense, but the Chicago Bears make sense too, and a desperate need for wide receivers. I mean, completely desperate need for wide receivers. So much cap space. They've done some offseason housekeeping. They will officially get a bunch more space once Mike Glennon is released at the start of the new league year. And just imagine that any potential offensive difference maker free agent is mentioned, the San Francisco 49ers are going to come up because they've got still plenty of cap space. I don't think this buzz about Jimmy Garoppolo is fake. I think it's palpable. I think this buzz the players are feeling
extremely real. Agreed.
Very real, that they want to go play with him right now. They view him as potentially the next great thing at quarterback. I think Allen Robinson, Chicago, San Francisco, maybe Baltimore, although they don't have quite as much flexibility, all makes sense.
Listen, John Lynch has been very clear that they're sort of using this as a sales tool.
Sure.
And why wouldn't you? Hey, Jimmy Garoppolo's locked up. He's here. Come play with us. DeAngelo, what about the struggles or the challenges of returning from injury in an instance like this?
It's just really trying to figure out if I'm that same player. Am I as explosive as I used to be, especially at the wide receiver position? Allen Robinson is a guy who uses that speed, and he gets in and out of his breaks with the best of them. And so for him, it's just being comfortable. You know, I think the good part, he was injured week 1, I think.
He sure was, yep.
And so he had essentially the whole season.
Long time.
Where a lot of guys get hurt week 10, 12, 11. It kind of lingers on during the season. So hopefully, because he got injured early, he can bounce back and, be effective.
You know, Teddy, there's the physical recovery, but
that's true.
You know, how does that mental aspect, because I think you're right, just believing that you're that same guy must be hard.
Allen Robinson, yes, but the mental aspect also that I want to talk about, Wendy, is with Blake Bortles. Because, man, what this was turning into with Allen Robinson. 2015, 80 receptions, 14 touchdowns from Bortles. 2016, 73 receptions, 6 touchdowns. You started to see a development of quarterback receiver, like the 1-2 punch right there, but then he goes down, and in week 1, and all of a sudden now it's possible that he might not even be there. Blake Bortles is going to miss this guy. That touchdown production, he was a great receiver. You hope he can just get back on his feet and be a productive receiver in the league, which I think he can.
Hey there, I'm a glue stick, so I have one job. I glue kid stuff. So sorry for being jealous of Geico, who does a ton more, like give you 24/7 access to thousands of licensed agents. And Geico has been around for over 75 years and has a 97% customer satisfaction rating. While I've just got mediocre adhesive skills, Geico also has an award-winning mobile app. Uh-oh, arts and crafts time. No eating the glue stick, Miss Lydia.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
Press coverage now from the Carolina Panthers. Graham Gano and the team have agreed on a new 4-year deal. So Graham Gano staying put in Carolina for the time being.
It's my quarterback. There's 3 quarterbacks in this football team. Whichever one starts. Whichever ones don't, we'll back them out.
I want winners. That's your quarterback!
You think your team has found a quarterback?
This is a quarterback league. It's that simple.
And they've never gone about the business of finding a young quarterback.
There's nothing in that business without a lead quarterback.
Do whatever it takes to get that guy.
That's where we are with quarterbacks these days. You're taking a flyer on potential.
There are two kinds of teams in this league. The teams that have the quarterbacks and the teams that are still chasing ghosts.
Well, there is no question about that. I don't think anyone's going to argue it's a quarterback-driven league. DeAngelo Hall here with us today. And, you know, none more talked about right now than your former quarterback, which I'm still getting used to saying, Kirk Cousins. It's the first domino that we expect to fall, and he'll sort of spark that quarterback carousel. But since you've sort of lived this, let's start with this. Kirk Cousins is in Washington. He's franchised for 2 straight years, plays under the tag. Now, of course, will not be back. You know, I think people have so many questions about this, DeAngelo. Like, take us inside the organization. How did we get here, in your opinion?
You know, I think we got here by, you know, a couple of different things happened. I said earlier, I think Kirk Cousins realized he was better than RG3 before the organization did. And so I think we took a little too much time in realizing how good he was. And then when it was time to really pay him, we kind of said, hey, we want to see a little bit more. And we did that, and then his number kind of went up, and we were kind of like, well, we still want to kind of keep you in this ballpark. And he wanted a little more. So we said, all right, well, we'll franchise you again. And then finally we just started getting a feeling as though, well, maybe he really doesn't want to be here. And so he wanted to kind of pick his own destination, I felt like. And, you know, that's kind of why we're where we are right now.
Okay, so it's interesting you say that. And by you, we mean the Washington Redskins sort of get the sense that perhaps Kirk Cousins doesn't want to be there, because from this perspective, we're saying it doesn't seem like they necessarily want to fully commit either. So what gave you the sense that Kirk Cousins might want to play elsewhere?
I felt like some of the offers that at least we heard about, just being players in the locker room, you know, you kind of hear whispers.
Sure.
And so some of the offers we felt like we heard, we were like, man, you know, that's a good deal. You know, why wouldn't Kirk take it? And da-da-da-da. And so we kind of did a lot of talking amongst ourselves. And so it was just a feel, you know. He never said anything.
Understood.
He never walked around like, man, why am I here? It was never anything like that. Kirk, from the moment he got in that locker room, he was nothing but a pro, nothing but a professional. He went about his business. But it was just something about the way negotiations were taking place. I've been in this league 14 years, and I still to this day have never quite figured out, you know, like you said, exactly what went wrong. No one really has all the information except for, you know, those parties involved. And so we all on the outside try to figure out, like, how did we not get this young kid locked up? And so, you know, from the outside, though, or even being inside, we never really quite got all the information to even make a fair assessment.
Sure. And I ask this not because in any way to suggest that Kirk Cousins is not the consummate professional, because I think everybody would agree that he is, but we're also all human, you know, and things affect us. Do you think the ambiguity, if you will, of the situation affected his play at all?
I don't think it did. Kurt's never been a guy who took a lot of risk. He's always been that safe, conservative type of quarterback. Not saying that's good or bad, but the reason I wanted to see Kirk Cousins get a long-term deal is because I wanted him to really play with no
abandon.
Yes,
loose.
Yes,
just
loose.
Turn it loose.
Not really feeling like, man, if I throw a couple picks, you know, am I still going to get the free agent, you know, the money I won, or are they going to sign me? They want me to prove it, and, you know, this isn't proving it. And so it always kind of felt like he had a little bit of a responsibility to be perfect, and that, I think,
can be limiting. And, you know, it's interesting because some players thrive under that. Some players sort of just, and then others,
and the quarterback position is a tough position.
Without,
you know what I mean?
Like,
being a corner is a little different. Obviously, there's a lot of stress on you, but it's not being a quarterback. That's a very unique position to play.
So Tedy referenced this earlier, that with each signing, especially with the quarterbacks, one resets the market, and we go on. So you have to believe that Kirk Cousins will reset the quarterback market. Is he worth the money he's about to get paid?
If I'm running a team, it just depends what kind of team I'm running and where do I need help at. You know, if I already have a team in place, offensive weapons that can help him win football games, absolutely. Somebody asked me the question, would you take Kirk Cousins over all these guys? I'm like, if money's not an issue, absolutely.
Right, but we know it is. It's a salary cap league.
But because money is an issue, then you have to kind of figure out how your roster is constructed. Do I need to get better at offensive line? Do I need to get more weapons? Is my defense good enough to help us win? Am I just a quarterback away? If you're just a quarterback away, you pay Kirk Cousins whatever he wants to get him because he will win for you. But if you need to kind of manipulate that cap and try to figure out, I don't know if I got enough money for this or that. I don't know if $30 million, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So let's
for one position.
In a vacuum. And I recognize that nothing operates in a vacuum, if you will. But if it did, and I say he'll make the type of money that elite quarterbacks, say Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers make, do you say makes sense? Or do you say, I don't know?
Because of the business, it makes sense. But personally, I don't know.
That's a fair answer.
Just from a growth standpoint, Kurt's shown he can throw for 4,000 yards and do all those little things. What I want to see him do is evolve into that Tom Brady and evolve into that Aaron Rodgers where he's at the line, he's making checks, he's changing plays. He really, really understands the defenses. He got to the point in Washington where he understood his offense. And so for him to be great, he has to not only understand his offense, but he has to start understanding exactly what defenses are trying to do and understand where he's weak at and grow in those areas.
Well, and it goes back to your original point of wanting to see him locked up for the long term there to give him that time and security to perhaps take that next step.
That freedom to feel like, hey, I can sling it and I can I can take chances.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, we do expect Kirk Cousins to be the first domino to fall, if you will. So Tedy and Field standing by now with the quarterback carousel to take us through some scenarios. Guys?
All right, Wendy, we're here at the quarterback carousel, Field and I, and we're going to go through certain quarterbacks and where we think they're going to end up. And
That's not Kirk Cousins.
No, the first domino, of course, is not Lamar Jackson. He's in the draft, but not Sam Bradford. We're going to go to Kirk Cousins right here and where we think that Kirk Cousins is going to go. And for me, we see the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not thinking there. I'm not thinking the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people
all that
say
money, though.
A lot of people see the Denver Broncos. Field, this is where I'm going. I'm going right up here to the Minnesota Vikings. So that's where I'm going to put Kirk at because of what he can do there. I would love to see him on that team. That whole atmosphere when Case Keenum was doing the Skol chant, who he had. I think if I'm Kirk Cousins, I want to be a part of that. I want to throw to Thielen. I want to throw to Diggs. Rudolph is still there. So listen, this is where I'm going. Minnesota Vikings. What do you think, Field?
I like the idea a lot. I think it's pretty clear that although Case Keenum played fantastic football last year, Mike Zimmer, the head coach, could never get fully on board with him, even during that incredible stretch. Kirk Cousins almost feels like the last Lego to complete the set, right? A roster that's talented in all three levels on defense. An offensive line that was rebuilt last offseason and until some late season injuries was really good.
Dalvin Cook coming back.
Will be back. Talented wide receivers. Kirk Cousins, it all seems to fit.
Okay, so if we got Kirk Cousins going to Minnesota, we got a little domino effect going here on the carousel. Yep. So we'll go to Case Keenum. Where do you put Case Keenum?
All right, so Case Keenum, tremendous year last year, as we said. The reservations are that perhaps it's a small sample size, just 1 year versus a lot of other years where he wasn't as good. All right, so we move him on from the Vikings.
No Bills?
Actually make
no Bills?
this list. No, the Bills, I think about that, but maybe Tyrod Taylor sticks plus a drafted quarterback. Here's the team right here. If I can scroll it up, the Arizona Cardinals.
Nice jersey.
And here's why. Nice looking jersey. Here's the reason why. The team has no quarterbacks under contracts as of right now for 2018. They're picking 15th in the draft, which is sort of purgatory for draft in terms of where you can find a quarterback.
Right in the middle of the round.
Quarterbacks will get pushed right up to the top of the round. And if they're other fringe guys, they might go from the second round to the back end of the first round. So they may not have an obvious first-round target. They do have some money to spend, and as we know, they've got question marks beyond Larry Fitzgerald at wide receiver. The offensive line needs to be repaired, but it all starts with acquiring a quarterback. Case Keenum in Arizona makes sense.
So Keenum to Fitzgerald, you like that combo?
I wouldn't hate it at all. Any quarterback. I could go to Larry Fitzgerald, and I'd be okay with it.
So here's the next domino. So Keenum in there. How about Teddy Bridgewater?
Ooh.
A little comeback story here. Where you putting TB here?
All right, so we've got Arizona accounted for. We've got Minnesota accounted for. Chargers, no, we don't need that. Colts, Dolphins, no. Let's go back up this way. Go back up to these teams that are particularly quarterback needy. And how about the New York Jets? Hear me out here. I understand that they could well pick a quarterback with the 6th overall pick in the NFL draft. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater, maybe even in his own mind, is expecting to cash in with a major 5-year, $100 million type deal right now. I think there are a lot of question marks still about his physical recovery from that knee injury almost 2 years ago, and then he hasn't played a snap of consequence in 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
So he might be willing to take a 1 or 2 year deal, sort of reprove it. Would make a lot of sense for the New York Jets.
Yeah, definitely cheering for Teddy Bridgewater to get back and play in good play.
Well, the clock is ticking quite literally now. We are under the 2-hour mark. The deadline today, 4 o'clock Eastern, for teams to designate franchise or transition tag players. And just to revisit the Le'Veon Bell situation, the Steelers have told him they do plan to apply the tag on him. It would be the 2nd straight year. And, of course, we now know a deal is highly unlikely by today's 4 o'clock deadline, a long-term deal in that instance. Bell says he won't play for less than $14.5 million a year. Here's Jeremy Fowler with more.
The Steelers and Le'Veon Bell find themselves in a position they wanted to avoid. The team is set to give Bell the franchise tag for the 2nd straight year, setting the stage for an offseason of tension and only one promise, that the tag is worth around $14.5 million should Bell sign it.
Here comes Le'Veon Bell. Tyler, touchdown. Bell gets the call, runs downhill. Touchdown, Le'Veon Bell.
All options are on the table for Bell, who told ESPN he shouldn't settle for anything below full value. After Bell skipped training camp and signed his $12.1 million tag 6 days before last season, the Steelers wanted no distractions this time around, aiming for a new deal before today's deadline. Bell and the Steelers publicly expressed optimism. But the team's latest contract offer didn't quite reach the standard for Bell, who wants at least $14.5 million per year.
Right ahead into the end zone, touchdown untouched.
2-hand catch by Le'Veon Bell, touchdown Pittsburgh.
The core issue is the position Bell plays. He is the ideal running back for modern NFL. He touches the ball 25 times a game. He's an elite pass catcher. He's a lead stinger in the Killer B trio with Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. Yet the Combine was buzzing with this question. Should the Steelers pay up to $15 million per year on a widely devalued running back position, even if Bell is the game's best? Pittsburgh has yet to answer that question.
To give to Bell. Bell into the end zone. Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown.
I want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler for life. Hopefully everything gets done so that we can make that happen.
Hope remains that Bell can retire a Steeler. But after nearly 8,000 total yards in just 62 games, production not seen since the NFL-AFL merger in 1970, Bell wants to be a standard bearer for running backs, telling ESPN his retirement consideration is real. That conviction is about to be tested. Let the fireworks begin.
And that conviction certainly will be tested when those checks don't roll in, because that, put your money where your mouth is. That's exactly what will have to happen. Look, I think the question really is a simple one. He's expensive. He's very good. Can the Steelers afford not to sign him?
Well, I think if you mean sign him as in give him the franchise tag, no, they cannot afford to bypass the franchise tag and just let him test the open market. But I just don't think that Pittsburgh is as willing to move off of some of its marks to get a long-term deal done easily as I think people might want them to be. They are going to essentially dig their heels in. The 1-year franchise tag entitles him to $14.55 million. That means he's going to collect nearly $27 million over the past 2 seasons. In their eyes, they can afford to go year by year for these 2 years because they understand that if he really wants that long-term security, the further along he gets in his career, I think other teams become less likely to pay a player at that position premium money. So I think Pittsburgh is comfortable going year to year right now.
Yeah, so what are the ramifications, though? What are the ramifications for 2 years in a row, putting someone that the locker room loves, your team loves, your fans love, the players look to, they want him to get paid, but you're putting him in a situation where, you're somewhat compromising his ability to maximize his financial gain. And players take that personally. Players can possibly get behind him. And the words that these general managers use and they plant through the media in terms of the running back being a devalued position, talking about what Jeremy Fowler said in this piece. Come on. Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, has he not shown that this position is not devalued? If you have someone like Le'Veon Bell, it's the most important position because he produces the most for your team.
Yeah, they have to sign him. He does so much for their football team. Not talking about just running the ball. I'm talking about his ability to get loose on screens, his ability to go line up at receiver in the slot and exploit that matchup. In the NFL, it's all about exploiting matchups. And anytime Le'Veon Bell's on the field, he can exploit his matchup versus whoever they put on him.
Listen, DeAngelo, you said this earlier, but I think it's a point worth emphasizing. You think he's serious about this holdout or potential retirement?
Yeah, I don't think he's serious about retiring.
Okay, because that's a big word.
That's a stretch.
Something you said earlier about if this was you, you'd hold out to week 10. Explain that.
We have the ability in the CBA to hold out to week 10 and still get an accredited season.
Accredited season,
That's all I'm saying, to week 10.
So if the deal
gets done sooner, then you come in. Right. But he has the ability to hold out to week 10 as the longest he can hold out and still get that accredited season. If he holds out all year, he comes back, he's in the same situation.
Still play on that 1 year tag.
You're just not paid. You're not paid that 10 weeks
for those 10 weeks.
But you get credit for the season.
But you still get credit for that season.
Dolphins owner Stephen Ross made headlines on Monday. He weighed in regarding NFL players and the national anthem. This is what he told the New York Daily News on Monday. All of our players will be standing. He continued to clarify this was Tuesday. All of our players will be standing. Initially, I totally supported the players in what they were doing. It's America, and people should be able to really speak about their choices. When that message changed and everybody was interpreting it as anti-military, and that was the reason I was against the kneeling. Again, more, he says, and this is now today, I have no intention of forcing our players to stand during the anthem, and I regret that my comments have been misconstrued. So whether they were misconstrued, I don't know. He now says, look, clearly he would prefer his players to stand. He's not going to force anybody to do so. DeAngelo, we've all talked about this, so let me start with you. Where do we go from here? This doesn't seem to be an issue that's been completely resolved by any stretch.
Yeah, I don't think this issue has been resolved at all. I don't even think it's really been talked about, out there in front, kind of behind closed doors, but no one's really sat down and really asked, hey, how can we make this better? And I think it's simple. I think you have to give guys the option or the choice. Hey, if you're not going to stand, would you mind staying in the locker room? And then you can come out after the national anthem. But, you can't make a guy stand. It is America. He has to be able to make his own choice and decisions and deal with those ramifications.
You deal with two different perspectives here. A perspective of a player. If I feel something and I want to make a stand against something that I feel strongly about, if I choose to protest during the national anthem, I feel that's my decision. That's one perspective. Then the other perspective is of the owners. This is my company. Mm-hmm. This is my company, and we all represent the United States of America during the anthem. And personally, as an owner, I do not want any protests during the national anthem. That's the way they feel. So you see how it all played out last year. This is an issue that's still going forward because there's almost, I don't know if I can guarantee this, but something will come up with us, one player or a group of players during the season where they want to show or they want to speak of how they feel about a certain social issue or something they feel strongly about, and they will protest how they feel they want to.
Yeah, I think you can guarantee that. I mean, we haven't resolved it, and when you lay out those two perspectives, I think, to be candid, I understand to a degree both perspectives, and I'm not sure how to reconcile that. There must be a way, but I don't know that I know what it is, and we haven't found it.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of the issue is it's hard to, anytime we hear comments relating to anthem protests or players kneeling during the anthem, it's hard for me to not take the totality of the situation into account and say, why did Colin Kaepernick take a knee? It wasn't anti-patriotism by any stretch. It wasn't anti-military by any stretch. It was police brutality and racial oppression that he was kneeling against. And somehow it got lost in translation along the way. And I think we understand some of the factors involved that led to that. Now owners will say, well, I don't want my players to kneel, in part because I don't want to send an anti-patriotic message. So it's like the players are now being punished for something that they never, in the beginning, initiated. And I feel as though we haven't gotten anywhere along this, I don't know if progress has been made at all. I've heard the NFL.
I don't think we have.
The NFL at one point last year talked about how they want to have this open dialogue with players about difficult conversations and topics to have. And yet it seems like anytime a player makes even a peep about the possibility of making a stand, through kneeling for the national anthem, he is criticized. At best, criticized. At worst, blasted.
Look, I think we've tried to try. We said we'll try. We said both sides said we'll talk. We've tried to try. We haven't gotten very far. But I would ask this as former players: can you foresee a situation where this is something that ultimately has to be negotiated? That whether through a CBA or whether through long-term talks, that you say, okay, our players will stand or they won't stand, or they'll stay in the locker room or they won't. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but nothing else we haven't gotten anywhere otherwise.
I think as players, you realize now if do they see it as that's the point to make the biggest stand where people will see and where people will listen, because you have personal belief of yourself and then also of that individual that's exhibiting that protest. Do I believe you should stand during the national anthem? Yes. But if I see someone kneeling during a national anthem, there is someone with something on his mind and he has something to say and he is trying to make a point. So listen to what that point is. It's not about him. It's not about you. It's just about you feel a certain way. That young man feels a certain way, and that's his way of expressing it. And in America, you have a freedom of expression.
Yeah, I think Teddy's absolutely right. Everybody has to be able to voice their own opinion. That's what makes America great. That's why I'm who I am, you're who you are, and likewise, we have to be able to say, hey, I don't really agree with that, and this is why. You know what I mean? You have to have reasons for why you feel a certain way. And some of that is how we were brought up. I wasn't brought up the same way you were, and I'm sure a lot of other people weren't brought up the same way. So we all come from different places, and we're at different places in our lives. And so different things affect us different ways, and we need to be able to express that.
And the one thing to understand, though, I in terms of everything that's been said here so far, those people in the stands and those people that watch the games, they are the ones that basically pay the bills too. I mean, those are the ones that are buying the tickets, that are buying all of the packages to watch your game. So on the same hand, at the same time, you don't want to upset your customers also. So it's a very fine line, a lot of things to think about.
Well, they're your stockholders, right? I mean, they're the stockholders in this very profitable corporation that we've all benefited from. And I think that's why there's so many layers to this. We mentioned this to you before, but the NFL says longtime referee, 28 years as a matter of fact, Ed Huckley, retiring at the age of 67, and penalty explanations will never be the same.
Yes, there are penalties in the Pro Bowl. Pass interference, defense number 24. To reverse and replay, there must be clear, uncontroverted evidence that the ruling on the field was wrong. In other words, you have to be certain. The quarterback did not throw the ball from in the end zone. He was just out of the end zone when he threw the ball. The foul for intentional grounding stands. It's a half the distance to the goal foul and a loss of down. It brings up fourth down.
My flag was being returned to me. It was tossed back to me, hit the ground. When that happened, the clock operator thought there was a penalty and stopped the clock. The clock should have continued to run.
First down.
Well, it's no surprise the Eagles would take some phone calls, and certainly there'll be offers for quarterback Nick Foles. Some say the price may be too high. The question, what happens next? Here's DeAngelo's take earlier today.
Get rid of Foles. You don't need him. I mean, what is he there for? He's there to do what? He was a stopgap. Yes, he won the Super Bowl. Nobody thought he could do it. I don't think anybody outside of Philly thought he could do it. He did it. Congratulations. He played excellent football all throughout the playoffs. But if I'm Philly, I'm moving him so I can get value, because that value is going to disappear.
Listen, I'm unclear on how you feel. I'm going to get you to clarify in just a moment. But first, this is from Louis Riddick. A different take. He tweeted this: I would not trade for Nick Foles unless I could bring his head coach too. And I would not let Nick Foles leave Philly in 2018 either, for obvious reasons. It's an open and shut case for me. Your argument, DeAngelo, though, in all seriousness, is that his value will never be higher. He's a Super Bowl MVP. It doesn't get much better. Why not now?
I'm saying this, okay? Because I know on first take I kind of went off a little bit. But all I'm saying is this. Nick Foles can play in this league, yes. He obviously had the success because of that offensive coordinator, that quarterback coach, I guess, that connection. He was able to grow as a player. All I'm saying is if Carson Wentz, he said he was going to play week 1. If he's ready to play, then Nick Foles you don't need on your roster. If Carson Wentz is rehabbing and has a setback, that's a different story. If they're looking for Carson to play week 5, 6, 7, 8, yes, you need Nick Foles on your roster because you need a good backup.
The caveat there, of course, is you have to be sure